I'm sure my mom was just trying to protect me. Now that there's only one of us left, I thought it was time I heard the stories. But now I'm worried the stories themselves might be the problem. Maybe we believed so much in a family curse, we made it real. But it had to end one way or another.
Salut les kitsune de YouTube, j'espère que vous allez bien. Et on se retrouve pour l'épisode 2 de What the Romance of the Edith Finch. La dernière fois, on avait pu voir l'histoire de Grégory. Ce qui était arrivé au pauvre Grégory qui est mort noyé dans sa baignoire. Un manque de vigilance de ses parents. Et donc là, on va passer au prochain.
My mom moved up to the loft after her brothers died. At the time, it was as far away as she could get. I can't imagine what it was like for her to lose 2 sons after she'd already lost 2 brothers. She spent a summer building houses in Calcutta, where she met my dad, Sanjay. Religion was another thing my mom never talked about, but I think it helped her a lot after her dad died.
La religion.
My mom moved to India a week after graduation and got a job teaching English. Louis was born a year later. When my dad died, I don't think Mom knew where else to go. I'm sure Edie was happy to have her back. The house had to get a little bigger, but Edie was used to that. And for a while, things were good. Almost normal.
Pendant un temps.
But it didn't last. The beginning of the end was Milton's 10th birthday, when Edie gave him a castle. After Milton disappeared, the only thing he left behind was a room full of paintings.
Il va falloir qu'on trouve un moyen de rentrer dans la chambre de Milton. Là.
Milton Finch in The Magic Paintbrush.
Milton dans La brosse magique.
I was 4 when Milton disappeared.
Il est mort ou il a juste disparu? Moi j'ai rien compris. J'ai juste vu qu'il a peint une porte, qu'il a ouvert la porte, qu'il a fermé la porte et c'est tout. Moi pour le coup j'ai rien compris.
Mom spent months searching for my brother. Then she sealed the doors.
D'accord, donc il a disparu, il n'a jamais été retrouvé.
Whatever Milton had found in the house, Mom didn't want it getting out. Mom definitely blamed Edie, but I think Lewis blamed himself. After he graduated, he just spent more and more time in his room. Until Mom got him a job at the cannery.
Donc là, c'est Lewis.
Everyone always told me to stay
Oh,
out of
pas mal la
Lewis's
chambre.
room. Except Lewis.
Alors, la chambre de Lewis.
Lewis's room smelled very, very familiar. Lewis and I spent a lot of time playing games together, but he was surprisingly bad at them. He died a lot.
Bref, on dirait une Super Nintendo, mais...
Dear Mrs. Finch, as Lewis's psychiatrist, I can understand your desire for an explanation. As I see it, the trouble began in January, shortly after we convinced your son to seek treatment for substance abuse. Newly sober, I believe Lewis first noticed the monotony of his daily life. He kept working at the cannery, but he withdrew part of himself. In our sessions, I saw the same behavior. His mind began to...
a commencé à dérailler, on dirait.
wander.
Ah d'accord, il faut que je bouge le personnage.
I asked him to describe it.
Tout en travaillant.
He said he started small. Imagining a labyrinth. He'd feel his way about. Then something moved.
Ah, la galère.
Bats. things that have not names. He knew it was all in his head. But he took it very seriously. I had hoped he'd find himself. But he found something more. I worried about him then.
L'impression de jouer à un jeu de rôle.
Daydreaming at the cannery. I spoke with his boss. But he said Lewis had become a model employee. Methodical, tireless, focused. Like a whole new Lewis. So I let him go on.
C'est une galère.
I even encouraged him. It seemed very promising at first. He told me he'd made a new friend. On the edge of a city he named Lewis Topia.
Merde.
He built the city up slowly, brick by brick. Then he made musicians.
Oh, il y a des types bizarres qui font de la musique. Il y a des
And
gens
songs
bizarres
for
qui
them to
dansent.
play. He talked about starting a band. And he was always humming something. Every day his
Ah
imagination
bordel,
grew
c'est de
strong.
la merde avec les poiscailles.
He no longer spoke at the cannery. But his chopping was as reliable as ever. Then one day it struck him. At all the cheering crowds, even the stones under his feet, were all in his imagination. So he could do whatever he wished.
Non, voilà.
He held an election for mayor. And he won.
C'est pris pour Mario.
They begged him to stay, but his
Laissez-moi
mind was
passer la
already
populace.
wandering. It became a game for him.
Oh putain, il faut encore équiper. Oh, maintenant il faut contrôler un bateau avec les poiscailles.
He'd conquer a
Ah,
city, then immediately
putain.
push on. New Louisville. St. Louis.
Voilà, attention.
He started drifting away from our
Récif.
reality.
Récif.
Minneapolis. Until one day he forgot to go home from the cannery. Even as his mother pleaded with him, part of Lewis kept sailing on.
Et tu m'emmerdes, toi.
In Louisburg, he heard rumors of a
Une rebelle, un beau prince.
handsome queen. The queen was on her own quest for
Un arc-en-ciel rayonnant.
radiant rainbows. He followed the sound of her
Sa guitare électrique.
electric sitar. His chase led him to a golden palace east of the sun and west of the moon. Even then, his logic remained sound. He knew the world was all in his imagination.
Ah, mais c'est quoi tous ces pascals d'un coup?
But he was so proud of having created it. In his own eyes, he'd become something greater than a king. For someone who'd never known success in the real world, I think it was overwhelming.
La princesse est en haut.
And then it struck him that the real Lewis was not the one chopping salmon, but the one climbing the steps of a golden palace. My imagination is as real as my body, he told me. It was hard to argue with him.
Ah, ça y est, enfin, et fin de poiscaille à la counoise.
He began to forget the world we
Tous
know.
drogués à la marijuana.
I think it pained him to remember Lewis, the cannery worker. He began to despise the man with a royal contempt. I still thought I could save him. Even after he
Dans
said he was
étrange,
being
donc
crowned
on a
king
vu
over all the lands of
Lewis
wonder.
de dos. Et on contrôle qui là, juste le perso.
The palace would be packed with his companions.
Merci, merci, c'est très gentil pour cet accueil. J'en attendais pas mieux, j'en attendais pas moins.
Including the
Vous
wise
êtes
Calico
aimable.
who'd insisted on advising
Merci, je ne vous connais pas, mais merci pour cet accueil. Bon, par contre, vous avez pas de visage, c'est normal. Molly.
his queen waited, holding his crown. There was only one thing left to do. Bend down his head.
Non. Hey, je suis pas con, je reconnais quand même l'engin. Hein. Moi je m'en vais. Hein. Au revoir. Prenez pas pour un débile non plus. Hein. Oh merde. Et avance. Avance, la sortie est là-bas. Non mais... Madame la reine, vous pouvez pas venir de ce côté-là, s'il vous plaît? Vous prenez pas pour un débile, hein, je sais très bien que c'est une guillotine. Pencher à la tête. Non, j'ai pas envie de pencher à la tête, moi. Tu veux pas devenir roi à ma place? Vas-y, je te laisse ma place. Donne-moi ta lance et je prends ta place. Vas-y, allez. Allez, mon pote. Vas-y. Eh, regarde. Elle est belle, la reine. Tu deviendras roi. Oh, il veut pas. Vas-y. Je prends ta place, tu deviens roi à ma place. Tu pourras gouverner le royaume. Tu auras une reine magnifique. Tu auras juste à pencher la tête pour avoir ta couronne. Non? Au lieu de danser, personne veut devenir roi à ma place. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un sur le chat qui voudrait pas devenir roi à ma place? Personne? Bon. Bon bah quand il faut y aller, faut y aller, je prends mon courage à deux mains. En avant. Ça peut couper une tête ça?
rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
My brother was really cool. I wish you could have met him.
Triste fin pour les Wyss.
On the way back from Lewis's funeral, my mom told me to start packing. She waited until the day before we left to tell Edie. I'm not sure if she wanted
Il
to make
était
it
tellement
easier
perché
or
le pauvre
harder.
qu'il a dû mettre la tête sous l'engin qui coupe les têtes des poissons.
I wish we'd stayed.
Quoi tous ces... Ça c'est Milton.
But I understand why we left. My mom ended up leaving everything behind.
En même temps,
What happened that night had been coming for a long time.
elle perd un
Maybe they
fils
should've come
qui avec ses problèmes de marijuana a fini par mettre la tête et se faire guillotiner. Un autre qui avait porté disparu, on sait toujours pas comment il a réussi à se porter disparu, comment il a réussi à disparaître. Parce que j'ai rien compris à son histoire avec la porte, avec la peinture de la porte.
All that's left now is to tell you about that last night.
Edith, ça c'est nous.
That whole last day, Edie just watched us pack and didn't say a word. Until supper, when she raised her glass and said,
"To our final night together, and all our final nights apart."
Grandma, you know what I said about alcohol. Some of your medications are very
Edith,
specific.
I left a present for you in the hallway. Why don't you go open it? The grown-ups have to argue now.
I'm sorry, you're right. We're all leaving tomorrow. Let's just enjoy our last...
I'm not leaving.
Edith, you're excused.
C'est là, la grand-mère et la petite fille pas sur la même longueur d'onde.
the power had been shut off that morning, but Edie always had plenty of candles. When my mom sealed the library, I don't think she knew about the other entrance, or that Edie had a key to it.
That thing you're afraid of isn't going to end when you leave the house. Edith has a right to know these stories.
My children are dead because of your stories. I think it's best if Edith and I leave tonight. We'll have the nursing home send a van for you in the morning. Okay?
Dear Edith, there's so many stories I wish I could tell you, but there's only time for one. This is about what happened on the night you were born. That night, the tide went way, way out. It was the first and last time I ever saw the old house aground. There'd been an earthquake out in the middle of the ocean. They called it the lowest tide in 1,000 years. God, it smelled awful. You know, I've seen that house every day of my life.
Edith, c'était la femme de Odin.
I never thought I'd go back to it. When the fog rolled in, I lost my way. I got turned around.
Bizarre, la maison était en...
I
il y avait
started
juste à continuer
seeing
tout droit.
things.
Ah, c'est...
Things I'd forgotten had ever existed.
Un lit.
But when I saw them, they felt like old friends. That night, a lot of things came back to me. Or maybe I came back to them. Things I can't explain, but that I need you to try and...
Edith, what are you doing in here?
It's mine.
Edith!
Mom, you're gonna rip it. Let go. I kicked and screamed, but Mom dragged me to the car. I never saw Great Grandma Edie again. The next morning, the band came to pick her up, but she was already gone. After that, we moved around a lot. We both tried to make the best of it. A few years went by. My mom didn't like to talk about it. But she started getting sick a lot. The rest happened pretty quickly. She got better for a while, and then she didn't. And then I was alone. The last Finch left alive.
Et il n'en restera plus qu'une.
Until I found out about you. I'm still not sure what to tell you about all this. If we lived forever, maybe we'd have time to understand things. But as it is, I think the best we can do is try to open our eyes. And appreciate how strange and brief all of this is. This journal was supposed to be for you. But now I hope you'll never see it. I just want to meet you and tell you all these stories myself. But I guess if you're reading this now, things didn't work out that way. This is where your story begins. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it. It's a lot to ask, but I don't want you to be sad that I'm gone. I want you to be amazed that any of us ever had a chance to be here at all. Good luck.
Donc Edith, elle est morte en couche. Et il n'en resta plus qu'un. Le dernier Finch. Bon, bah voilà ce qui conclut avec What Remains of Edith Finch. J'espère que le jeu vous aura plu. Franchement, c'est un jeu vraiment bien. Plein d'émotions et tout. Raconter l'histoire comme ça d'une famille. Le destin tragique d'une famille. Ou on pourrait même aller jusqu'à dire malédiction. Le jeu est très bien raconté et tout. Franchement, un très bon petit jeu. Pour ceux qui n'auraient jamais fait le jeu et qui voudraient le faire, à savoir qu'il est à la fois sur PC et sur console. Et c'est un jeu que je vous conseille vivement, du moins si vous aimez ce style de jeu. Sur ce, merci d'avoir regardé la vidéo. Cet épisode 2 de What's Wrong with Edith Finch et dernier épisode pour le coup. N'hésitez pas à mettre un j'aime ou un commentaire si la vidéo vous a plu. Et on se retrouve pour une prochaine vidéo sur un autre jeu. Prenez soin de vous.